All right, let's just give it a minute and we will start. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So before we kind of launch into the content for today, just a couple of things. You guys may have noticed stock market is up pretty considerably today, almost 1,000 points. And that is largely due to the announcement of the inflation figures today, which were less, I think much less than the Fed had originally thought. And so what that means for us as realtors is that the reason the stock market is up is because that may signal to the Fed that they don't have to raise rates as quickly or as much as they had originally planned. So the settling of interest rates for mortgages is always good news for us. So whether this is a one-day thing or an ongoing thing, we'll see. But the midterm elections are also over too. So for whatever that's worth, I do think that plays into the public's just general sense of hesitation to make any big decisions. Secondarily, for those of you in the DFW area, we are making a switch to the Broker Bay software program on November 16th, which replaces showing time. And so for those of you that have listings, I am going through the process now of just tweaking those. They're already in Broker Bay, they're just not live. So I am going through the process of making sure that they all match at least what's in the MLS. So if you haven't signed up for the training for that, please do that. If you need me to resend the link, I can do that as well. I'm going to share my screen and show you where it is in Netris, by the way. So when you sign into netris.net, you know, this is where you kind of sign into the various things, right? Well, here's the icon for Broker Bay. So if you haven't signed up for the account, go ahead and do that. Just as a refresher, it is free. It's free for buyers. It's free for listings. I had somebody tell me yesterday that Showing Time charges him $40 a month per listing. So this will be free. So if you haven't signed up and gotten an account, go ahead and do that. All right. So today we are going to do a little boot camp on the mobile home niche of business. And I'm doing this because you cannot believe how many questions I get about this sector of real estate. You know, can we represent clients? Can we not? If the answer is yes, you know, what do those details look like? And so I figured I would go through a tutorial on what it means to sell in this space and kind of some things to look out for. So, so what is the difference between a mobile home versus a trailer? The short answer is nothing, you know, but people just, you know, call them mobile homes, right? So, so the various categories of mobile homes is you have a single wide unit, which is obviously much smaller, and the least expensive. You have a double wide unit, which is double what the single wide would be, and they come in, all sorts of shapes and sizes as well. And then you have manufactured housing, which pretty much behaves like a mobile home. And so Steve Donchis is on today that has actually spent quite a bit of time in the manufactured housing space. So Steve would welcome your input, as well as anybody else that has ventured into this area. But you also have communities which are over 55, and then you have just general retirement communities. But before we kind of move on, Steve, do you have any commentary on manufactured housing and the difference between that and a mobile home, or just any kind of commentary in general? And you'll have to unmute.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, manufactured housing is anything that was built after 1976.
Right.
So prior to that, they were called mobile homes. After 1976, they're actually built to HUD standards, HUD code. So they're a little bit more solid, if you will.
Yeah.
Back in the day, they certainly just kind of slapped them together. Today, there's a lot of good technology that goes into these things. So yeah, they're pretty solid compared to what they used to be, certainly. And they do have to build them to HUD code. So I think that really makes a big difference on it as well.
And a manufactured home is, I mean, when you think of a single wide or a double wide, you'd think of kind of a shotgun scenario, right? Where you can open up the front door and shoot a shotgun, and it goes out the back door, because they kind of look like a big rectangle. A manufactured home isn't necessarily that way, and I know that Steve, you've done quite a bit of that. So in terms of how they are affixed to the ground, can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, there's options, of course. So you can actually just take the home and just set it on the ground without even tying it down. It's not recommended. But what I used to do is I would actually pour a concrete foundation, and we would actually strap it down to that foundation. At that point, it became real property as opposed to personal property, which is going to be the difference there. So once they're strapped to the ground, they become real property, just like a house.
Okay, awesome. And we're gonna go through that a little bit more later. I've got some pictures as well. So thank you for that. So the question is, do I need a license to sell a manufactured or mobile home? And here's what Trek says. While the sale of a manufactured home, meaning no real estate, so to Steve's point, the land underneath it is not owned by the same person that owns the mobile home, okay, requires a separate license from the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. And we're going to go to that website in a second. Under a TDHCA exemption, a Trek license holder can sell one manufactured home during a 12-month period without a TDHCA license. In addition, once an owner of a manufactured home has completed the detailed TDHCA process to treat the manufactured home as real property, the TDHCA licensing requirement does not apply to a Trek license holder. So this would be a structure that is not affixed to land. Okay. Now, mind you, you really can't list them in the MLS, but they can enlist your help to do that once a year, pay you a commission. But we're going to go into kind of what that looks like in a second. All right, so here is the general sense of the construction and structure. So mobile homes are literally pre-assembled in a factory. And this is a little bit of an inside look as to what they look like as they're being constructed. So quite a bit different than a single family home, right? So, and then they pretty much rest on a quote unquote foundation that looks like this, right? And so this is just the metal frame that the structure is going to sit on. So these wheels underneath it are temporary. That's just for building purposes. So once you set this structure down on the ground, the only way to move it is to have a company come in, and it's not inexpensive. It's, you know, $6, $7, $8, $10,000 to move one of these things. But they kind of jack it up, put wheels underneath it so that it can be transported. But all this to say that you'll notice that there is a gap between this, you know, kind of this bar here and the actual ground. Okay, so this on the left-hand side is kind of what it looks like when it's set up on cinder blocks or wherever it's going to go. This is just being moved in. You can kind of tell there's wheels underneath here, right? But it is resting on its quote unquote foundation. So there is a big gap in between the structure and the ground. Okay, so the picture on the right represents what you do to cover up that gap. All right, underneath here is all of the utilities as well, which we'll go into in a moment. Underneath the structure is all this, but that skirting, they call it, which is usually metal or vinyl in nature, serves as a covering so that you don't see that. Okay, so let's talk about the utilities for a second. So in a mobile home park, you're going to see rows and rows of mobile homes, right? And each of them are going to be separately metered, which is what you're looking at on the left. You can kind of see the skirting there next to that. And the wiring and the cabling that goes underneath, they call this a pole or pedestal, that will now go through the left underneath the actual structure and provide electricity to the home. On the right is your sewage drains, okay? So you are either going to be on a septic system or a tying into city sewer, okay? But this all kind of behaves a lot like an RV park, where it's, you know, travel trailers, but you know they're coming and going every day, every week, whatever. But the hookup to it is very similar, right? And so whenever you see a new construction single family home subdivision, you will see some of this electrical, but it eventually gets buried, or it gets covered up by a transformer box in the yard. It does not look like this. So you know the main distinction is that a lot of this can be exposed. Okay, so comparisons to a single family home. So they are typically not secured to land, and so they are vulnerable when storms hit. So there, to Steve's point, there is an option. You can quote unquote tie these down, but it is not at all like the construction of a single family home where there's a foundation poured, there's piping that comes up from within that foundation. That's your plumbing, you know, your electrical is all established ahead of time. It's not like that, okay? And although, to Steve's point, there have been a lot of advances made in this space, it is not, the construction is not equivalent to a single family home. Typically, you're not seeing obviously 2-story structures. It's just not the same. And you know, the ones that I've seen, I mean, if we go back to where you kind of see them put together, and Steve, maybe you have some commentary here, but I have never gotten a sense that they are well insulated. I mean, what is your feedback there?
Actually, their insulation's come a long way over the years. It's there is every bit as airtight and insulated as a house is. I mean, they truly are when it comes to insulation. You know, when they go through their factory, they're prefabricated. So, you know, they use very chintzy materials. They don't use 2x4s. They just use a lot of really cheap material, very lightweight material. to put these things together. When you actually, like even the ones I did where I actually tied them down to a concrete foundation, when you're walking across the floor, I mean, you know you're in a mobile home. You know
Right.
you're in a manufactured home. It's not like you're walking on a foundation or a solid floor. So yeah, they're definitely not it can't be compared to a regular home
Right.
as far as construction goes, but certainly they are very efficient, far more efficient with the insulation than they really ever used to be. So that's come a long way.
Okay, good. That's good to know. And I mean, all of them have, you know, central HVAC and heating. I mean, they should. You see some of them with wall units for sure, but usually it's all electrical. I mean, there's no gas to these structures typically. And then the telltale sign that it's a manufactured home is the ventilation usually is from the floor. It's not, you know, on walls or from the ceiling. So, and it is a depreciating asset. So it is very similar to an automobile. It's rare that you'll see, you know, I have been in some parks where they're very well kept up, but you typically can't get more for them 10 years from now than you did when you bought them. So, you know, just FYI. But the whole reason that I'm really having this discussion today is that the affordability of housing is an issue, and these make a great first home, or just a great permanent home in general. There is nothing wrong with this class of home ownership, but there is some differences. So I just wanted to make sure that we were aware. All right, and to my point, they are more affordable than a single family home. And we're going to take a look at some pricing at the end, just to give you a sense of you know, how much they cost. They can be moved, kind of. It's not recommended. I mean, we've always been behind, you know, one of these wide load type of scenarios on the highway, where they're transporting, you know, one of these units from one place to another. It's not really recommended. Once they're kind of in place, they're in place. So, you know, just FYI. And there's going to be a minimal yard, minimal storage. You know, that's why when you see a mobile home on, you know, a piece of land or a piece of rural land, typically they've built other structures on that land to address the fact that there's no garages, right? So, so that, you know, for some people that's a deal breaker. And then typically, if you're talking about a mobile home within a mobile home park, they are sold just like a car. So there's no title company involved. Land, different story, right? So if the mobile home goes with the land or vice versa, that is treated like a real estate transaction. Okay, so where are they? So you have them in mobile home parks, or on a piece of rural land, right? Which is very common in the state of Texas. So if they are in a mobile home park, again, you know, you're going to typically see rows and rows and rows of these things. And, you know, they're typically going to be owned by a management company now, or run by a management company. An individual can own a mobile home within a mobile home park. So they would just own the structure. They will pay rent for the land that is underneath that mobile home. Just FYI, that's how that works. Okay, so let's talk about the mobile home park scenario. So in any mobile home park, there's going to be a mixture of owner occupied and rental properties. Okay, typically 0 yard, 0 storage. But everyone does pay what's called lot rent, right? So if you have gone to the trouble of purchasing a mobile home within a mobile home park, your mortgage payment or monthly payment might be X, but you're going to pay a certain amount above and beyond that to rent the land underneath it. How much does that normally go for? Anywhere from $200 to $500 to $600 a month, depending on the location and depending on whether or not utilities are included or if it's separately metered. Usually there is a management company in place that manages that whole process. The incoming, outgoing of tenants, ownership, evictions, foreclosures, those types of things. Right. And as I said before, once that unit is in place, it is rarely ever moved. All right. So it is not uncommon for someone to, miss their lot rent or, run into foreclosure, and then just to kind of abandon that home. And so typically the management company is in charge of refilling that property or taking possession of that property. All right. And then in that structure, you are usually on city utilities. So it's city sewer, not a septic system. It's city electric, city water. Okay. Yeah. Now, a mobile home park, they're typically not built many more of these, by the way, because with the advent of inexpensive mortgages and single family home developments, it's hard to get a town to approve a brand new mobile home park, even if it's in the middle of nowhere. All right, so for anyone thinking about investing in this space, just be forewarned. All right, and so mobile home park realtors aren't ever involved, as these can't be listed in the MLS, right? As we saw what the TREC rule said earlier. So if you have not driven through a mobile home park, you should. You may see a lot of for sale by owner signs or for rent by owner signs because of this fact. Okay, and as I said, lots of for sale by owners or management company handles sales a lot of times. A lot of times in a mobile home park that still has some available land, they will contract with a manufacturer, and that manufacturer will place a vacant brand new mobile home on a piece of land, and the management company will be responsible for selling that. Okay, so it's not always pre-owned. All right, so let's talk about rural areas. So in this case, it is usually considered real estate because the land goes with the home. There is also in the MLS a status that you can put on there for single wide with land, double wide with land. It's in there, right? So this is treated as if it is a true real estate transaction. You are typically hooked up to a septic system and well water and whatever electricity is available out there. Okay, this is not an easy thing. Okay, a septic system for a typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath can run you $30,000 and up. Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is not inexpensive to put in a septic system. Well water, there's a bunch of hassles there too. In electricity, that can be an issue as well. Just because you see power poles does not mean that your potential buyer is not going to have to spend a lot of money to get electricity run to that mobile home on a rural piece of property. Now that's if one doesn't already exist, okay? But if you have a buyer that is looking for a rural piece of land and it has a mobile home on it, please be mindful of how their utilities are configured. All right, and then realtors can actively sell these in the MLS. You're going to have more storage just because there's more room, right? Versus an RV park, or I'm sorry, a mobile home park. All right, so each mobile home is going to have a unique identifier or VIN number. And this is what one looks like. Okay. And all things mobile home and manufactured homes related goes in Texas, goes through this particular website. All right. And the TDHCA was mentioned earlier. So let's just go to this website. So you can do, this is like the MLS for, well, take that back. This is like the Central Appraisal District for manufactured home. Okay, so you can look up the seal number or owner number by homeowner name. If you had this number here, you could put that in there and up would pop the ownership records. Okay, you would also come to this website if that decal didn't exist, and that happens. If it's an older home and that, through the years it's been, I don't know, gone somehow, you can come here and re-register it. If a mobile home starts out as a traditional mobile home and the owner wants to then affix it to the land in the manner that Steve was speaking of, tying that structure down, you would come here to do that. Okay, so this is everything that you would ever need to know and the place to go to if you wanted to do anything with that manufactured home. So that being said, if you are in a rural area and the buyer wants to buy that piece of property with the mobile home on it, it's critical that you make sure that the seller has proof that he owns that mobile home. Because remember, it is personal property, right? So there should be some kind of proof that someone else doesn't own that structure. Okay, so that's important. All right, so can I represent a client in the mobile home space? So if it is a lease on a piece of land, yes, you can. If it is a lease within a park, no, you can't. And the reason is not just because typically a management company has oversight over that. It is because the management company has to approve the tenancy and the viability of that lease. Okay, so if a family started out living in a mobile home in a park and they then moved to a single family home, but wanted to keep that home in the park and rent it out, let's say you were the realtor that helped them go buy their single family home and they ask you, hey, can you help me lease this out? The answer is no. And the reason is because the management company is going to need to approve that tenant. Okay, it's not up to that owner. All right, sale of a mobile home on a rural piece of land, yes, you can, because it is a real estate transaction. Sale in a park, no, because it is personal property and they are renting the land underneath it. Okay, so that doesn't qualify. Okay, park-owned homes, as I mentioned, park-owned homes will require approval from the management company. All right, so this actually is not a bad space to get into when it comes to investing. And so you could flip a mobile home just like you might with a car. If you picked up a car for $1,000 and put some money into it and resold it for $10,000, same principle. They are typically easy to rehab. The parts and the finishes are usually easy to get a hold of. And there are plenty of construction companies or handymen that do specialize in this. Now, if it is a mobile home in a park, you can still do it, but the management company is going to have to be involved in that process. But it can be an inexpensive and somewhat quick way to make a few $1,000. Okay, you could buy a park and collect the lot rent and rental income from units. So think of a mobile home park that has a mixture of some rental properties and some homes that the owners own the unit, but they're renting out the lot rent, or they're paying lot rent, right? Could be a great way to, treat this like a rental property, multifamily home endeavor. And similar to a lot of these types of investments, a lot of these are owned by non-institutional owners, so mom and pop owners. and they can be a great investment. Or you could look at acquiring a piece of land that already has mobile homes on it, and rent them out. There is a lot of that in Texas, and you might not even have to worry about vacancies. So you may be able to acquire a piece of land with 3, 4, 5 of these on them, with tenants already in place, and all of a sudden you're a multifamily landlord. Okay, so it is a quicker way to get to that goal versus acquiring individual single family homes at $300,000-$400,000 a pop. Okay, so where can you find mobile home rentals? So not that you would ever engage with a client for this, but I'm sure that you guys have gotten questions about this. There's a great website called www.mhvillage.com, and you can go there to find rental properties as well as units that are for sale. Okay, so check that site out. Right, so potential buyer issues. Okay, I cannot tell you how many times I get questions from realtors that kind of don't know where to go when a person says, hey, I really just want to get a piece of land. I want to put a mobile home on it, and just kind of camp out there. I want to get away from it all. Or they want to put a mobile home on it and live there while they build a home on that existing land. Okay, that is a very, very common conversation. Challenge is that you can't just do that. Okay, just because the buyer wants to do that, and just because it's in some rural piece of land that is in the middle of nowhere, means that they can actually do that. There are plenty of zoning restrictions or HOA restrictions that prevent you from doing that. Okay, so a good listing agent will have put that in the listing. So this would be an example of where the person, you're trying to now buy land for this person, and because they think that, well, how difficult can it be just to buy a plot of land and put a mobile home on it? Well, it could be very difficult. Okay, so be mindful of deed restrictions that prevent that. Hey, consider the availability of the utilities, right? So again, just because there is a electrical pole 500 yards from this piece of land doesn't mean that they can get electricity. All right, the biggest issue is going to be sewage, right? Are you going to be on a septic system or the city's sewer facility? All right, so unless there are already hookups there, this can be a very, very, very expensive proposition. Okay, and how are they going to transport it there? Okay, that is not easy and it's not cheap. Okay, and then how much does one of these things cost? You're probably wondering that. All right, so before we get into lending, a common manufacturer in Texas, at least, of mobile homes is Palm Harbor Homes. If you've driven on your way to, from any of the major cities in Texas to any of the other major cities in Texas, you are crossing, rural land, and you don't have to go very far out of the city limits to find a mobile home manufacturer. So Palm Harbor is a common one. You'll see right here, homes starting from $59,900. Okay, if you come here, let's look at this one. And this, I went onto the clearance tab for Palm Harbor, and this is a brand new structure for $189,560. Let me find another one. Here's one for $89,900. Okay, so they're affordable. Here's another one in Alvin. 169.9, kind of looks like that. Okay, so these are brand new. The prices go down the older the unit is. Okay, so you can kind of see why this would be an attractive proposition for someone that can't necessarily get into a single family home right now. So let's kind of go into the lending piece. So I have JC on the line. And so JC, here is what pretty much I have as it relates to getting a mortgage or a loan on these types of structures. What can you tell us about the lending process?
Well, all of this is great information, Brad, and all of it is accurate. The only thing I would change is that it is because the mobile homes or manufactured homes are affixed to foundation. There are 30-year notes available for that once that happens. And from my experience, the biggest challenge I see from a lender is, to your point, people want to move into a mobile home and then build their dream home, and then later maybe retain that mobile home, as a granny flat or something like that. But I have seen where the lender will ask them to remove it off the property completely because the lender is using the existing new home as collateral and not the mobile home. And we've also done where that exact same scenario, the owner went and actually divided the property into two properties, two parcel numbers, so they were able to keep the mobile home on the land, but just bought the one parcel property, if that makes sense.
Yep. So in everything that you've said, that really applies to a structure that goes with the land.
That goes with the land, correct.
Okay.
So again, somebody moved in, or I'm sorry, somebody bought land, moved a mobile home there, or was already existing, but their intent was to build another home.
And are there only certain kinds of lenders that can do that kind of mortgage? And are there special programs if you want to purchase a mobile home with land?
Yep. So mobile homes with land, we can definitely do as long as they have a foundation and it was built from 1976 or newer. If it is not enough foundation, we cannot do it. If it has been moved, we cannot do it. If it was, now let me clarify moved. When you originally purchased it from Palm Harbor Homes and they physically moved it to the piece of land, that is obviously moving it, but that's going to be okay. But then if you moved it again, maybe you bought a neighboring property, maybe you didn't like where you first placed it and you wanted to move it again, it is very difficult to buy or to get financing for a mobile home that's been moved twice.
Okay. And if someone wanted to purchase a mobile home in a park, mobile home park, where they just rent the land, do you have any idea of how they do that?
Yeah, so a mortgage lender like myself would not be able to assist you because that is more of personal property, but there are lenders out there that specialize in that. And I can get anybody information in regards to that, but because it is not on a foundation, I mortgage lender, your typical mortgage lender would not be able to help.
Okay. Okay. Steve, do you feel comfortable in kind of taking the group through what your experience was or maybe is still buying that land and partnering with manufactured home companies?
Sure. Yeah, actually, I've wrapped up my last one. So at this point, I'm just moving forward just with the real estate portion of my career. So unless a land opportunity comes up in the future. But basically, the biggest thing is deed restrictions for sure. If you're trying to buy a piece of land to put one of these on, deed restrictions would be one of the biggest barriers. So you have to really do your homework and make sure that there's there's no deed restrictions against having that. You know, beyond that, you need to have, for utility purposes, if there is no city water or city sewer, then you would you need at least 2 acres to get a septic system and a well on a piece of land, basically, in order to get that to qualify. You know, beyond that, it really isn't too much different from, I guess, buying a home. So just, you know, do your homework, make sure there's no deed restrictions, and be sure you have enough room to do it. And then just go ahead and go for it, you know?
So just to give everyone's the backstory, so Steve purchased some land in Decatur.
Yes, yeah,
Okay, so
absolutely.
Decatur, and how many acres?
So in Decatur, I was in an area where it was an old subdivision that got platted out back in the 70s. And I guess the people that platted it out, they'd end up taking the money and running. So the area actually never got developed. So all these people have this land that they could really do nothing with, because there's no roads, nothing out there, no city water, city sewer. So the area out there, Upper Trinity is the name of the water company out there. It's not really a water company, but they oversee where you can put a well and how much room or how much land you need to do that. They put a variance in place where you could only need to have half an acre in this area. So you only need to have half an acre of land in this subdivision out there in order to do a well and a septic. So that makes it a lot more attractive out there, but it's very rare to find that kind of an opportunity.
Yep. So
Basically,
yep. So you bought this land and partnered with a company that builds manufactured homes, and began to put these homes on these lots and sell them, correct?
yeah, absolutely. So, you know, it's I went anywhere from half an acre up to an acre, just kind of depending on what the lot was when I purchased it. So the more land, and generally the more you'd be able to get out of it. So, but yeah, Clayton Homes is who I ended up partnering with, and it was a great relationship with them. They're a top-notch builder. I've also dealt with Palm Harbor. I've dealt with Legacy Homes, but I mean, Clayton Homes is they're a cut above the rest that I've dealt with in the manufactured home community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when someone came forward and wanted to buy that home with the land, what was the process to get them a mortgage? Did you kind of pass them along to somebody, or did they kind of handle that themselves?
Yeah, they handle it on their own. We've dealt with everything: VA, FHA, conventional. I mean, like I said, with me doing the foundation, it's actually putting a concrete foundation down and tying it down to that. And anything's offer is available. Any kind of financing is available on that. So yeah, we just kind of dealt with them all. We had basically 30-year FHA conventional notes, and it just went right through. It was no problem.
Yep. And the utilities were already in place?
So that's what I did. I ended up putting in, so, you know, I developed the land myself. So I took out any trees and any other issues, and put in a septic system and put in a well. And up there, it was then actually the energy was a co-op. So they came in, and I mean, it was really very affordable to do all this. They put in the telephone pole, or the power pole, if you will. Whether they needed to run one pole to get it to where you're at, or 3 or 4 poles to get it to where you're at, it was the same cost, it was very inexpensive. Again, it was just, it's the ideal area out there to do that. It's probably not what you're going to find on typically if you're going to try and do rural land out on 2 acres, kind of more out in the air, in a country area. So yeah, it really was good. But yeah, just developed the land, put the foundation down, and then, yeah, I said, put a well and a septic in, and put the power pole in, and just had it all hooked up.
Yeah.
Tied it down to the slab, and it became real property at that point.
So just so everyone kind of gets an idea, and really personally, to to understand the visual. When we say tie the property down, what does that look like? What are they tied down with, and how many places around, you know, the perimeter is it tied down?
Well, that's why we'd use you can use the concrete, which is definitely preferred, and that's how you're going to get your loans. If you can tie it down to a dirt pad if you want to. Generally, any mobile home that's dropped is going to be tied down, whether it's tied down to concrete or dirt. Basically, when we do the concrete, we put in metal spikes that go 24 inches into the ground. I mean, they go down in there and they're actually cemented into the ground. And then we use metal banding, strapping, to actually affix that from the home to the to the spikes, basically. And it just goes all the way around the house, depending on how big the house is, but it's basically every 4 feet, there's going to be a strap that's going to be holding that home to the ground. And they're pretty strong as far as, you know, heavy winds won't even budge it. So it's pretty strong. It's not like a conventional house, of course, but it certainly is. It'll withstand quite a bit.
Okay, yeah, and I'm sure that they tell you like how strong the wind resistance is. Like it can hold up to whatever, 70-mile-an-hour wind, 100 hour, you know, whatever.
Right, and even in coastal areas, they you can put them in a coastal area too, but they have to be, there's required for, I think it's a wind level 4 is what they call that, in order for a home to be actually installed on a coastal area. Outside of that, anywhere within the state of Texas that's not required. Gotcha.
Okay, well, good. Well, thanks for that. That's really helpful. So does anybody have any questions of either Steve or JC? Well, hopefully you took away some tidbits. I think that the most common scenario, again, is when a buyer reaches out to you and you know, has this idea that they wanted to get this piece of land and put a mobile home on it and think that it's going to be easier than it sometimes is. So you know, as always, I'm always available to answer questions if that does ever come up, if you ever get stuck. But so anybody else? Questions, comments? All right, good. Well, next week is our CE opportunity with Allegiance Title, and it's going to be on marketing through direct mail. And so I'll send out the flyer for that. You can sign up. It's $5 or $10. And if you don't want the credit, that's fine. You can show up anyway. And then the Thursday after that's Thanksgiving, so we're not gonna meet then. But I just want to give you a heads up on what's coming next Thursday. So thank you guys, and we will see you same time next week. Have a good rest of the week.